Have you ever wondered what would happen if you stopped listening to the voices that told you it's impossible and started believing in the voice within yourself? What if the only approval you ever needed was your own? In a world cluttered with opinions, judgments, and constant evaluation, the most revolutionary act might be the simple decision to believe in yourself when no one else does. This is not merely a motivational platitude. It is the foundational truth that has propelled humanity's greatest achievements and personal transformations throughout history. Today, we'll explore the profound philosophy of self-belief, why others' validation remains elusive until you validate yourself, how the external world merely reflects your internal reality, and the transformative power that emerges when you align with your authentic purpose despite universal doubt. If you find value in this message, subscribe to this channel now. And before we continue, share your personal affirmation in the comments below by completing this sentence. I manifest unwavering belief in myself even when. Before any person believes in your vision, you will walk alone. And it is in that silence that your strength is born. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the rest of the world sleeps, there exists a profound truth that has guided humanity's greatest achievers. The external world is merely a reflection of our internal landscape. This isn't mystical thinking, it's psychological reality. When Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote in his seminal essay, Self-Reliance, that what lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us, he wasn't speaking in mere platitudes. He was articulating a fundamental principle of human existence that science continues to validate today. Consider the subtle signals we transmit. A woman enters a negotiation doubting her worth, her posture slightly stooped, her voice carrying a barely perceptible tremor, her eyes darting away at critical moments. The world responds not to her capabilities, but to her doubt. Not because the world is cruel, but because it is perceptive. Conversely, when you carry yourself with quiet certainty, not boastful arrogance, but grounded conviction, people respond differently. They lean in, they listen, they begin to see you as you see yourself. A fascinating study from Harvard Business School demonstrated that entrepreneurs who displayed authentic confidence secured venture capital funding 30% more often than those with superior business plans, but visible self-doubt. This mirroring effect operates on levels beyond conscious perception. The neurological concept of mirror neurons suggests that humans are biologically wired to detect and reflect the emotional states of others. When you doubt yourself, you activate doubt in others. When you believe in yourself, you activate belief. The eyes of others, our prisons, their thoughts, our cages, wrote Virginia Woolf. But what if the reverse is equally true? What if your self-perception becomes the lens through which others see you? Thomas Edison faced over 10,000 failures before creating a functional light bulb. Had he internalized the skepticism of his critics, electrical illumination might have been delayed by decades. Instead, he famously said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." His persistence wasn't mere stubbornness. It was anchored in an unshakable belief that transcended temporary setbacks. But this mirroring extends beyond individual achievement. It shapes our relationships, our communities, our collective decisions. Nations rise and fall on the collective self-belief of their people. Movements succeed or fail based on the conviction of their leaders. What confidence are you projecting into the world today? What reflection are you creating? Because in the end, people won't see your potential until you see it. They won't feel your power until you feel it. The world doesn't believe in magic until the magician believes in the spell. And yet, this truth prompts a deeper question that few dare to confront. If our self-perception so profoundly shapes our reality, what invisible prison have you built around your own potential? And more importantly, what key lies within you that could unlock it? Beneath the surface of every hesitation, every abandoned dream, and every "I can't" lies a landscape shaped by past wounds. Insecurity doesn't arrive fully formed. It is constructed brick by brick, word by word, moment by moment. Perhaps it began in childhood, that first time someone laughed at your earnest attempt, or in adolescence, when conformity seemed the only path to acceptance. Or later still, when failure left you questioning not just your methods, but your worth. Like water carving channels into stone, these experiences create pathways of doubt that become increasingly difficult to redirect. Research in developmental psychology reveals that by age 8, most children have already formed core beliefs about their competence. These beliefs then act as filters, selectively gathering evidence that confirms what they already know to be true. A psychological phenomenon called confirmation bias. The child who believes they aren't good at math misses the significance of their occasional successes while magnifying every mistake. But insecurity's most insidious power lies in its invisibility. We rarely recognize it as a constructed narrative. Instead, we mistake it for reality itself. The greatest tragedy of the human mind, wrote Emerson, is that we measure ourselves against others' expectations and become afraid to trust our own judgment. This tragedy manifests as the constant seeking of external validation, the addiction to approval that keeps us imprisoned in others' perceptions. A programmer abandons her revolutionary software idea because colleagues express skepticism. A writer shelves his manuscript after a single rejection. A visionary leader dilutes her boldest innovations to avoid criticism. In each case, external doubt merely activates internal doubt that was already present, waiting for permission to take control. Yet within this understanding lies the path to liberation. If insecurity is constructed, it can be deconstructed, not through affirmations alone, but through the deliberate archaeological work of examining its foundations. Begin by asking, whose voice do you hear when you doubt yourself? Trace it back. Is it a critical parent, a dismissive teacher, a competitive sibling, a society that defines success narrowly? Name these voices. In naming them, you begin to separate them from your own. Then, examine your evidence. The human mind gives disproportionate weight to negative feedback while discounting positive experiences. This isn't personal failure, it's evolutionary wiring. Our ancestors survived by paying more attention to threats than opportunities. But, in the modern world, this same wiring leads us to compile comprehensive dossiers of our failures while maintaining only vague impressions of our successes. Create a concrete record of your capabilities. Document times you've overcome, adapted, learned, persisted. These aren't exercises in egotism, they're recalibrations of a skewed perception. Finally, understand that action itself dissolves insecurity more effectively than any mental exercise alone. Each step taken in the face of doubt weakens doubt's hold. Each risk embraced expands your territory of comfort. Each failure survived proves your resilience. As Friedrich Nietzsche observed, he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Finding your why, a purpose that transcends your fear, transforms insecurity from an insurmountable barrier to a necessary teacher on your path. The person who eventually believes in you won't be swayed by your promises or potential. They'll be convinced by your perseverance in the face of doubt, including, most importantly, your own. But as you begin this journey of confronting insecurity, a crucial distinction emerges that many fail to recognize. A distinction that, once understood, transforms how you navigate the delicate balance between healthy self-belief and its counterfeit. In the popular imagination, self-confidence and arrogance often appear as neighbors on the same spectrum, as though believing deeply in oneself inevitably leads to dismissing others. This fundamental misunderstanding prevents countless individuals from embracing their power, fearing they might cross an invisible line into self-importance. The truth, however, reveals them as entirely different territories, separated by a crucial divide: internal orientation versus external comparison. Genuine self-confidence is fundamentally inward-looking. It says simply, "I am sufficient for the challenges before me." It makes no claims about others. It requires no diminishment of another's light to shine. It seeks neither to impress nor dominate. Like the oak that grows toward the sun, without concern for whether it stands taller than neighboring trees, authentic confidence pursues excellence rather than superiority. Arrogance, by contrast, is perpetually outward-focused. It cannot exist without comparison. It says, "I am better than." It requires an audience, demands recognition, and feeds on others' perceived inferiority. The arrogant individual is paradoxically dependent on the very people they claim to surpass, for without them, who would there be to impress? Emerson captured this distinction when he wrote, "To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment." Self-confidence is precisely this, the quiet courage to be authentically yourself without explaining, apologizing, or comparing. Consider how differently these mindsets manifest in action. The confident leader welcomes challenges to their ideas, knowing that truth matters more than being right. The arrogant leader defends against all criticism, perceiving questions as threats to their status. The confident artist creates from inner necessity, unconcerned with whether their work fits current trends. The arrogant artist creates for acclaim, measuring success by recognition rather than authentic expression. The confident conversationalist listens with genuine curiosity, secure enough to learn from others. The arrogant conversationalist waits impatiently to speak, using others' words merely as launching pads for their own importance. Perhaps most tellingly, confidence creates energy, while arrogance depletes it. Have you noticed how truly confident individuals leave you feeling expanded, inspired, more capable? Meanwhile, interaction with the arrogant often leaves one feeling diminished, drained, somehow lesser. This occurs because confidence operates from abundance. It assumes there is enough success, enough recognition, enough opportunity for all. Arrogance operates from scarcity. It presumes that for me to win, others must lose. This distinction illuminates why self-confidence represents not selfishness, but liberation. It frees you from the exhausting performance of proving your worth. It releases you from the prison of others' assessments. It returns to you the energy previously spent on comparison and redirects it toward creation. As the philosopher Epictetus taught, make it your business to draw out the best in others by being an exemplar yourself. True confidence doesn't need to announce itself. It manifests as a quiet dignity that elevates not just you, but those around you. When you stand firmly in your truth, without needing to convince others of your importance, you demonstrate perhaps the rarest form of courage, the courage to be simply, unapologetically yourself. And in that authentic self-expression lies a power that no external validation could ever provide. But this raises an inevitable question that confronts every visionary at the beginning of their journey. What happens when you're ready to move forward, but there's no audience cheering you on? How do you take those first crucial steps when you stand entirely alone? In the vast silence before recognition arrives, when your vision exists only in the private chamber of your mind, lies the most sacred moment of any journey. The decision to begin without witnesses, guarantees, or acclaim. No one applauds a seed pushing through soil. No audience gathers to watch an artist's first clumsy attempts. No investors line up before proof of concept. This moment of solitary beginning has been the crucible for every achievement that later appeared overnight. Consider the reality behind what we perceive as sudden success. Rowling wrote in obscurity while living on welfare, rejected by 12 publishers before someone saw potential in a story about a boy wizard. During those years, her belief in her work substituted for external validation that hadn't yet arrived. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak assembled the first Apple computer in a garage, with no magazine covers, no venture capital, no market demanding their innovation. They had only their conviction that personal computing could transform human capability. Catalin Carrico spent decades researching mRNA technology. Demoted and marginalized within her field, her funding repeatedly cut. Years before her work would become fundamental to COVID-19 vaccines and save millions of lives, she continued without recognition, guided by an internal compass that pointed toward possibility when external markers pointed elsewhere. These narratives reveal a profound truth. Validation follows vision. It rarely precedes it. The world does not reward what it cannot yet see. Mainstream recognition is inherently conservative, clustering around the already proven rather than the merely possible. As Ralph Waldo Emerson observed, "Do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail." By definition, trailblazing means moving through unmarked territory, without spectators or cheerleaders. This principle extends beyond grand innovations to daily courage. The person beginning a fitness journey after years of inactivity. The employee offering a contrarian perspective in a meeting of nodding heads. The artist shifting to an entirely new medium mid-career. Each begins alone, witnessed only by their own consciousness. What makes this solitary beginning so challenging is that humans are social creatures, neurologically wired to seek tribal approval. The brain registers social rejection in the same regions that process physical pain. Going against the current of social validation literally hurts. Yet this discomfort serves an evolutionary purpose. It tests the strength of your conviction. If your vision fractures at the first absence of support, perhaps it lacks the necessary substance to survive implementation. If, however, it persists, through isolation and doubt, it demonstrates the resilience required for eventual manifestation. The great paradox is that what begins in solitude, if pursued with unwavering belief, rarely ends there. As Henry David Thoreau, Emerson's friend and fellow transcendentalist, wrote, "If one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life which he has imagined, he will meet with a success unexpected in common hours." This success unexpected in common hours arrives not because the universe rewards persistence in some mystical sense, but because persistence itself transforms both the pursuer and the pursued. The novelist becomes a better writer through the act of writing. The entrepreneur refines their offering through early failures. The athlete's body adapts to increasing demands. By the time external validation arrives, it is often merely confirming what the visionary has already proven to themselves. The oak tree eventually provides shade for those who never noticed its sprouting. But it did not grow for their acknowledgement. It grew because growing is what oak trees do. What is growing within you that requires no external permission? What would you pursue if no one ever clapped, shared, liked, funded, or praised? That is the question that separates performative ambition from authentic purpose. And in answering it, you discover that the most important applause comes not from an audience, but from alignment with your deepest truth. It is the quiet affirmation that arises when action and essence unite, when external behavior reflects internal conviction. But to access this truth, you must learn to distinguish between the cacophony of external voices and that singular inner voice that speaks with quiet authority. In the constant chatter of opinions, trends, and algorithmic recommendations, one voice speaks with a clarity that cuts through the noise. Not louder, but deeper. Not demanding attention, but quietly, commanding it. This is the voice that has guided visionaries throughout history. Intuition. Emerson called it the primary wisdom. A man should learn to detect and watch that gleam of light which flashes across his mind from within, yet he dismisses without notice his thought, because it is his. This dismissal of our own deepest knowing represents perhaps the most pervasive form of self-betrayal in modern life. We have been conditioned to trust external authorities, the expert, the credential, the majority opinion, while doubting the wisdom that arrives through our own direct experience. The consequence is a profound disconnection from our internal compass. Like sailors who have forgotten how to read the stars, we drift according to others' directions, then wonder why we never reach destinations that fulfill us. The voice within speaks not in thunderous certainty, but in quiet knowing. It communicates through subtle channels. The physical sensation that signals yes or no before the rational mind can articulate why. The persistent idea that returns despite logical objections. The inexplicable attraction toward certain paths and aversion to others. The coherence felt when actions align with authentic values. This intuitive knowledge has neurological foundations. Research in cognitive science reveals that the brain processes information on multiple levels simultaneously, with only a fraction reaching conscious awareness. What we experience as intuition often represents complex pattern recognition occurring below the threshold of conscious reasoning. Consider how this operates in mastery of any kind. The experienced doctor who senses something wrong in a patient's presentation before tests confirm it. The seasoned investor who feels unease about a seemingly perfect opportunity. The parent who wakes moments before their child calls out in the night. Each demonstrates how intuition integrates more information more quickly than deliberate analysis alone. Yet in a culture that privileges explicit reasoning, we often dismiss these subtle signals as just feelings. Emerson's contemporary, Henry David Thoreau, advised, "Trust your instinct to the end, though you can render no reason." This is not an abdication of rationality, but a recognition of its limitations. Reason excels at analyzing known variables within established frameworks. Intuition excels at navigating uncertainty, complexity, and novelty, precisely the conditions under which the most important life decisions are made. Learning to hear this inner voice requires a radical shift in attention. While the external world shouts for notice, the intuitive voice whispers. While external voices offer ready-made certainties, intuition often presents as a question, an opening, an invitation to deeper inquiry. The practice begins with silence, regular intervals of disconnection from input, allowing the mind's natural clarity to emerge. It continues with presence, full attention to the current moment rather than perpetual planning or review. It matures through courageous action, testing intuitive guidance in small ways that build trust in this internal wisdom. "Be as you are," said Emerson, "and trust yourself. Every heart vibrates to that iron string." This vibration, the resonance felt when something true is recognized, becomes the tuning fork by which authentic choices are measured. Those who have learned to trust this inner voice discover something remarkable. External resistance decreases. Not because circumstances magically align, but because decisions grounded in authentic knowing carry a confidence that transforms how challenges are met. When you trust yourself, you move with integrity in the original sense of the word. Wholeness. No energy is wasted on internal division or second guessing. This coherence generates a power that transcends conventional effort. The person who follows their inner voice becomes a conductor of something greater than personal will. They tap into what Emerson called the oversoul, the universal intelligence that flows through individual consciousness, when resistance to it ceases. But this inner voice, once recognized, makes an uncomfortable demand. It asks not just for acknowledgement, but for action. And in this requirement lies the true test of self-belief. In the ethereal realm of intention, everyone is equal. The aspiring novelist and the published author both picture their names on book covers. The entrepreneur with only a concept and the CEO of a Fortune 500 company both envision market dominance. The beginner athlete and the Olympian both imagine standing on podiums. What separates them is not the quality of their visualization, but the translation of vision into physical reality, action. "What you do speaks so loudly that I cannot hear what you say," Emerson wrote, capturing the fundamental truth that belief manifests not through declaration, but demonstration. Self-trust exists not as a feeling to be experienced, but as a principle to be enacted. Consider the subtle deception of motivational culture that often presents confidence as something to be attained before action begins. "Once I feel ready," we tell ourselves, "then I'll start." This formulation has the causal relationship precisely backward. Readiness does not precede action, it emerges from it. The paradox resolves when we understand confidence as a consequence rather than a prerequisite of meaningful action. Each step taken in uncertainty builds the capacity for the next. Each risk survived expands the territory in which we move comfortably. Each failure weathered proves our resilience beyond what theoretical confidence could provide. This principle operates across domains. The public speaker who masters communication, not by understanding speech theory, but by speaking, even as their voice trembles. The investor who develops acumen not by endless research, but by placing actual capital at risk and learning from the consequences. The artist who finds their voice not through contemplation, but through creating works they initially consider imperfect. In each case, action serves as both the expression and the builder of self-trust. This understanding transforms how we approach the gap between aspiration and accomplishment. Rather than waiting for doubt to dissolve before beginning, we recognize doubt as a constant companion on any meaningful journey, one whose voice diminishes not through argument, but through the accumulating evidence of our capability. Do the thing, and you will have the power, Emerson instructed. This formulation reveals action as generative rather than merely demonstrative. The capacity to perform any skill exists in potential before it exists in practice, accessible only through the commitment to begin before mastery is guaranteed. Michelangelo is said to have explained his sculptural genius by stating he simply removed everything from the marble that wasn't the figure he saw within it. Similarly, meaningful action chips away everything that isn't your authentic capability, revealing what was always present beneath doubt and hesitation. This principle explains why those who achieve remarkable outcomes often describe a moment of decision, not a decision to succeed, which lies beyond direct control, but a decision to persist regardless of outcome. They commit to the process with such conviction that eventual results become almost secondary to the act of expression itself. Thomas Edison's famous failures in creating the light bulb exemplify not just persistence, but the understanding that each unsuccessful attempt eliminated one possibility, bringing him closer to what would work. "I have not failed," he maintained. "I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." In this reframing, action itself becomes success, regardless of immediate outcome. The relationship between belief and action creates a self-reinforcing cycle. Initial belief, however tentative, enables preliminary action. Action produces evidence that either confirms or redirects the original belief. Refined belief enables more aligned action. With each cycle, both the belief and the action gain coherence and power. This cycle explains why those who begin with even modest belief but consistent action ultimately outpace those with grand confidence but sporadic implementation. The former engage reality directly, allowing their belief to evolve through contact with experience. The latter preserve their initial conception at the cost of actual progress. In practical terms, this principle offers liberation from the paralysis of perfectionism. It suggests that the question is not whether you're ready, whether your plan is flawless, or whether success is guaranteed, but simply, what is the smallest viable action you can take today toward what matters to you? Each such action, however modest, declares to yourself and the universe, "This matters enough for me to move toward it, even without certainty." This declaration, made not in words but in committed movement, constitutes the purest form of self-belief. Yet, even with this understanding, doubt will arise. The question becomes not how to eliminate doubt, but how to transform its very nature. In the landscape of achievement, doubt is not the adversary it appears to be. Like fire, it can either consume what you're building or be harnessed to forge something unbreakable. The difference lies not in doubt's presence, but in your relationship to it. Consider the voices that have attempted to extinguish history's greatest contributions. Decent enough pianist, but nothing exceptional. A teacher's assessment of Ludwig van Beethoven. You lack the basic requirements to learn physics. Albert Einstein's professor. We don't like their sound. Guitar groups are on their way out. Decca Recording Company rejecting the Beatles. Had these judgments been internalized as truth rather than transformed into fuel, our cultural landscape would be immeasurably diminished. The conventional wisdom suggests fighting doubt with blind positivity, drowning the critical voice in affirmations. But this approach misunderstands doubt's potential utility. Doubt, properly engaged, sharpens rather than weakens. It asks essential questions. Have you considered this angle? Are you prepared for this contingency? Is there a better approach? Our doubts are traitors, wrote Shakespeare, and make us lose the good we oft might win by fearing to attempt. The tragedy is not in experiencing doubt, but in allowing it to prevent action. The alternative is not eliminating doubt, but redirecting its energy. This redirection begins with a crucial distinction between doubt that questions your capability and doubt that questions your methods. The former attacks your essence, the latter refines your approach. Learning to translate the first into the second transforms paralyzing doubt into productive skepticism. When the internal voice says, "You're not good enough for this," reframe it as, "How specifically can I prepare more effectively? No one will value this. How can I communicate the value more clearly?" Each translation moves from judgment about identity to inquiry about strategy. This alchemical conversion of doubt into focused inquiry has practical applications across every domain. The entrepreneur who channels market skepticism into more rigorous customer discovery. The artist who uses critical feedback to identify genuine weaknesses in their technique. The leader who treats team resistance as valuable data about unaddressed concerns. In each case, what begins as an obstacle becomes a pathway to refinement. Emerson himself understood this principle when he wrote, "Let me never fall into the vulgar mistake of dreaming that I am persecuted whenever I am contradicted." This distinction between persecution and contradiction marks the boundary between victimhood and growth mindset. Contradiction, whether external or internal, offers an opportunity to test and strengthen convictions. The transformative power of this approach lies in its effect on attention. Conventional resistance to doubt creates a split focus. Part of your energy addresses the task itself, while another part battles the internal critic. By contrast, integrating doubt's useful elements into your process creates singular focus, with all resources directed toward excellence rather than self-defense. This integration requires a counterintuitive step, welcoming doubt rather than fearing it. When doubt arises, rather than immediately fighting or fleeing from it, pause. Examine it with curiosity. Ask, what valid concern might this doubt be pointing toward? What adjustment might address this concern while maintaining my core direction? This reframing transforms doubt from enemy to advisor, not one whose every suggestion must be followed, but one whose perspective contains useful elements. Like a sculptor who steps back to view their work from multiple angles, you use doubt to see what commitment alone might miss. They don't want to see you win? Even better, they won't understand how you came so far. This sentiment captures the ultimate transformation of external doubt, from discouragement to differentiation. When others doubt what you can clearly see, it may indicate not your delusion, but your distinction. The capacity to perceive and pursue what others cannot yet recognize defines visionaries in every field. Your unique combination of insights, experiences, and capabilities may indeed be invisible to others initially. Their inability to see your path doesn't invalidate it. It simply confirms that you're traveling territory they haven't yet explored. In this light, external doubt becomes confirmation that you're pushing boundaries rather than following established tracks. The skepticism that seems to question your journey actually affirms its originality. With doubt transformed from obstacle to asset, a remarkable shift occurs. The energy previously spent defending against doubt gets redirected toward your objective. Advancement accelerates, creativity expands, and eventually, something remarkable happens. The world that once questioned begins to take notice. There exists a threshold in every journey of self-belief, a moment when external reality begins to reflect what internal conviction has long held true. This isn't mystical manifestation, but the natural consequence of aligned action persisting beyond the point where most would abandon their path. History repeatedly demonstrates this pattern across domains. Vincent van Gogh sold just one painting during his lifetime. Today, his works command millions at auction. The transformation came not because his talent suddenly improved after death, but because his unwavering belief in his artistic vision eventually compelled the world to see what he always saw. Nikola Tesla's alternating current system was initially dismissed as dangerous and impractical compared to Edison's direct current. Yet Tesla's conviction in its superior efficiency eventually revolutionized electrical distribution worldwide. The technology didn't change, perception did. The Wright brothers endured years of ridicule as they attempted what experts deemed physically impossible. Their belief in controlled, powered flight persisted through countless failures until their 12-second flight at Kitty Hawk forever changed humanity's relationship with distance. The physics remained constant, possibility expanded. These narratives reveal a consistent principle. External validation arrives not at the beginning of belief, but somewhere along its persistent expression. The world doesn't believe first and then reward. It rewards what has already proven its truth through unwavering demonstration. This pattern explains why immediate recognition rarely accompanies genuine innovation. True originality, by definition, exists beyond current frameworks of understanding. It must create the context for its own appreciation. As Arthur Schopenhauer observed, all truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as being self-evident. The entrepreneur whose business model initially confounds investors but eventually defines a category. The researcher whose findings contradict established wisdom until mounting evidence forces paradigm reconsideration. The artist whose unconventional style alienates critics until it creates new aesthetic standards. Each travels this 3-stage journey from ridicule through opposition to acceptance. Understanding this progression liberates you from the need for immediate validation. When rejection comes, as it inevitably will for anything truly original, you recognize it not as the final verdict but as a predictable stage in the acceptance of new ideas. This perspective transforms rejection from terminal judgment to temporary condition. What sustains belief through this waiting period is the recognition that external validation, while gratifying, remains secondary to internal alignment. The sculptor doesn't carve stone primarily for applause, but because the form within calls to be released. The scientist doesn't pursue discovery mainly for accolades, but because truth compels investigation. The entrepreneur doesn't innovate chiefly for profit, but because possibility demands expression. This primacy of purpose over validation explains why those who eventually reshape their fields rarely begin with mainstream support. Their driving force comes not from external incentives, but from internal necessity. As Emerson wrote, "Nothing is at last sacred but the integrity of your own mind." Yet when recognition does arrive, it often comes not gradually, but suddenly. The apparent overnight success that actually represents years of invisible groundwork. This pattern occurs because perception shifts not continuously, but in thresholds. The world doesn't see 1% more each day. It doesn't see it all until a critical mass accumulates, then suddenly it cannot unsee. The author receives 27 rejections before one publisher takes a chance, leading to a bestseller. The musician plays empty venues for years before one influential listener changes everything. The business struggles until a single major client validates the model, opening previously closed doors. Each example demonstrates that external validation, once it begins, often accelerates exponentially. The first significant recognition creates permission for others to see value previously ignored. What was once deemed impossible becomes plausible. What was plausible becomes probable. What was probable becomes inevitable. This momentum creates a powerful feedback loop. External validation reinforces internal belief, which enables more aligned action, which generates greater external validation. The cycle that began in isolation now operates with multiplied force. Yet those who navigate this journey successfully maintain a crucial understanding. External validation, even when it arrives abundantly, remains a consequence of their truth rather than its source. They welcome recognition without becoming dependent on it. They receive acclaim without being defined by it. This independence preserves the very self-trust that made their journey possible. It ensures that should external validation fluctuate, as it inevitably will, their foundation remains unshaken. The world may now listen, but they continue to speak from the same authentic center that guided them when no one heard. For they understand that true belief was never about being seen by others, but about clearly seeing themselves. In the quiet moments before dawn, when doubt casts its longest shadow and the path ahead seems most uncertain, remember this: greatness has never emerged from perfect conditions or universal acclaim. It has always been born from that sacred trembling moment when one soul decides to believe despite every rational reason not to. What we celebrate in human achievement, from artistic masterpieces to scientific breakthroughs, from social movements to personal transformations, begins not with certainty but with a choice. A choice to hear the whisper of possibility above the shout of limitation. A choice to trust an inner knowing before external confirmation arrives. This is courage in its purest form, not the absence of fear, but the decision that something matters more than fear. Not the guarantee of success, but the commitment to significance, regardless of outcome. They will only see when you're already there. But until then, it's you with yourself, and that is all you need. This truth contains both challenge and liberation. The challenge lies in accepting that the most meaningful journeys begin in solitude. No crowd gathers to witness the first word written, the first experiment attempted, the first step toward recovery, the first stand against injustice. These Genesis moments pass unmarked, except by the consciousness that chooses them. Yet within this challenge lies extraordinary freedom. If validation comes later in the journey, then its absence at the beginning bears no reflection on your visions. The world's current inability to see what you see speaks not to your delusion but to its limited perspective. This understanding releases you from the paralysis of waiting for permission to begin. Emerson captured this liberation when he wrote, "To believe your own thought, to believe that what is true for you in your private heart is true for all men, that is genius." This genius resides not in exceptional talent, but in exceptional trust. The willingness to honor your unique perception even when it stands alone. History's transformative figures, from Galileo defending heliocentrism to Rosa Parks refusing to surrender her seat, share this common thread. Before their truth became our truth, they stood in the solitary conviction that what they perceived was real, regardless of consensus to the contrary. Your journey may not alter humanity's course, but its significance lies not in scale, but in authenticity. The parent who creates a new family legacy despite generational patterns. The professional who champions ethical practices within a compromised system. The individual who pursues healing when easier escapes beckon. Each demonstrates the same courage that has advanced human possibility throughout time. This courage manifests not in grand declarations, but in daily choices. The consistent decision to align action with belief, even when no one notices. To speak truth, even when silence would be simpler. To create even without guarantee of appreciation. To love, even without certainty of reciprocation. Such choices constitute what philosopher Søren Kierkegaard called the leap of faith. Not blind faith in fantasy, but grounded faith in what cannot yet be proven, but can be deeply known. This leap requires not the elimination of doubt, but the willingness to carry doubt while moving forward anyway. As you stand at your own crossroads between conformity and conviction, remember that your most powerful resource isn't external validation, but internal alignment. The capacity to recognize your truth and commit to its expression despite universal doubt represents not just personal courage, but evolutionary necessity. For how would humanity ever advance if each innovation required majority approval before its attempt? "The world steps aside," wrote Ralph Waldo Emerson, "for the man who knows where he is going. This stepping aside occurs not because the world immediately embraces your vision, but because conviction creates its own gravity. It attracts the resources, opportunities, and allies that resonance alone can summon." The paradox of self-belief reveals itself fully in this recognition. What begins as the most solitary of journeys, the decision to trust yourself when no one else does, ultimately creates the deepest form of connection. For when you finally express your authentic truth, you discover others who have been waiting for precisely this expression, though they could not have articulated it themselves. In this way, the most personal becomes the most universal. The courage to believe in your singular perception creates ripples that touch shores you cannot see from where you stand. And though these ripples may not return as validation in your lifetime, as Vincent van Gogh never witnessed, they nonetheless extend your being beyond its visible boundaries. Today, somewhere, someone is beginning. Someone is facing that terrifying, exhilarating moment of choosing belief without evidence. Someone is taking the first step on a path whose end they cannot see. To them, and to you, wherever you stand. On your journey, remember, they may not believe until you do, but your belief alone is already an achievement beyond measure. If this message has resonated with you, I invite you to subscribe to this channel now and join a community dedicated to authentic self-expression and purposeful living. Share in the comments where you're watching from and a personal manifestation statement that declares your commitment to self-belief. Something like, I manifest the courage to trust my vision even when no one else can see it. Explore our other videos on personal transformation and philosophical living. Each offers a unique perspective on the art of becoming who you truly are. Remember, in the words of Emerson, what lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. The journey begins with believing that what lies within you matters, perhaps more than you dare to imagine.